Okay. Welcome to the fourth program in this week of the Carol Spaziani Intellectual Freedom Festival. I'm Terry Byers, and I am a member of the Intellectual Freedom Festival Committee. And the Intellectual Freedom Festival was started in 1995 in honor of Carol Spaziani, who's here today. And we celebrate intellectual freedom. And intellectual freedom can encompass all kinds of things. And over the years, we've talked about newspapers and magazines and public opinion and social media, songwriting, song lyrics, books, libraries, of course. But today we're going to talk about poetry. And what we think of poetry, some people think of the classics, and some people think of contemporary stuff. And I'm going to start with a poem by Tupac Shakur. For Mrs. Hawkins, in memory of Yusuf Hawkins. This poem is addressed to Mrs. Hawkins, who lost her son to a racist society. I am not out to offend the positive souls, only the racist dogs who lied to me. An American culture plagued with nights, like the night Yusuf was killed. If it were reversed, it would be the work of a savage, but this white killer was just strong-willed. But Mrs. Hawkins, as sure as I am a panther, with the blood of Malcolm in my veins, America will never rest if Yusuf died in vain. So, before Tupac was talking about Yusuf Hawkins, poems spoke from their beings about what they felt they needed to say. Poets spoke about what they needed. And through the United States history, while it's relatively small compared to the rest of civilization, we can go back into periods of time and look at what was going on and really see it through the eyes of a poet. And that's pretty much what today's program is going to be. With the advent of the last century and half of the world being more accessible, and especially in the last 40 years in terms of social media, the world is your neighborhood, we can see that poetry has much more impact, because it doesn't just impact the United States, it impacts the whole world because it's heard all over the world now. With a few words, a poet can grasp larger questions and stir greater emotions, and that's the power of poetry through history. 50 years ago next month, President Kennedy said, "When power leads man toward arrogance, poetry reminds him of his limitations. When power narrows the areas of man's concerns, poetry reminds him of the richness and diversity of our existence. When power corrupts, poetry cleanses, for art establishes the basic human truths which must serve as the touchstones of our judgment." Today's program is split up into 4 sections. All of the poems, or all of the poets, some of the poems have all been banned or challenged. And we'll be looking at the ones that a lot of people already know. That's our first section of poets. That's the classics and classic American poetry, Whitman, Frost, and those folks. Then we're going to go into the late 20th century, which will include a selection from probably the most banned poets and poem in the 20th century or in poetry history, and that's Allen Ginsberg and selections from Howl. The third section is the discovery of other voices in poetry that have kind of reshaped our historic setting, and particularly women and people from other countries. And then our 5th section is the area of poetry for children, which is probably one of the most censored areas today. In the last 30 years, even Dr. Seuss has been banned. And you'll hear a selection from Dr. Seuss today. Our final poem will be a poem that was written in 2009 by a young adult writer who wrote the books Glass and Crank, Ellen Hopkins. And her books were challenged. And she felt outraged enough to write a poem. And we'll end the program with that. Afterwards, if we have some time, we can have a discussion about poetry and the place that poetry has. None of today's program would be possible without the Senior Center, Michelle Berman, who's here, and she helped us with our initial setup. They're also, the Read Aloud group is going to present the poems today, and Ina's going to come up and talk a little bit about that, and then we will start the readings, and I want to thank everybody for coming, and enjoy the program.
It's wonderful to see so many people here. These people in black in the front row and myself, we are from a group called Reading Aloud based at the Senior Center just a block away. And our passion is reading poetry to each other and in public, and poetry of all kinds. So we were not hesitant. We were happy to accept the library's invitation to be part of the Intellectual Freedom Festival and to read poems for you that, shall I say, are not quite as genteel as some of the poetry you might have known, but we find them great fun to read. I'd like to introduce the members of the group, starting over there. Johnny Ellsworth, Nancy Lynch, Nelson Girl, Jim Curry, Michael Chan, Carrie Malone, Kathy Mitchell, Betty Norbeck, Pat Huff. I'm Ina Lowenberg, and we will begin.
Song of Myself by Walt Whitman. I celebrate myself and sing myself. In what I assume, you shall assume. For every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. I loaf and invite my soul. I lean and loaf at my ease, observing a spear of summer grass. My tongue, every atom of my blood, formed from this soil, this air, born here of parents, born here from parents the same, and their parents the same. I, now 37 years old, in perfect health begin, hoping to cease not till death. Creeds and schools in abeyance, retiring back a while, sufficed at what they are, but never forgotten. I harbor for good or bad. I permit to speak at every hazard. Nature without check, with original energy. Houses and rooms are full of perfumes. The shelves are crowded with perfumes. I breathe the fragrance myself and know it and like it. The distillation would intoxicate me also, but I shall not let it. The atmosphere is not a perfume. It has no taste of the distillate. It is odorless. It is from my mouth forever. I am in love with it. I will go to the bank by the wood and become undisguised and naked. I am mad for it to be in contact with me. The smoke of my own breath echoes ripples, buzzed whispers, love root, silk thread, crotch and vine. My respiration and inspiration, the beating of my heart, the passing of blood and air through my lungs, the sniff of green leaves and dry leaves, and of the shore and dark-colored sea rocks, and of hay in the barn, the sound of the belched words of my voice, tossed to the eddies of the wind. A few light kisses, a few embraces, a reaching around of arms. The play of shine and shade on the trees as the supple boughs wag. The delight alone or in the rush of the streets, or along the fields and hillsides. The feeling of health, the full moon trill. The song of me rising from bed and meeting the sun. Have you reckoned 1,000 acres much? Have you reckoned the earth much? Have you practiced so long to learn to read? Have you felt so proud to get at the meaning of poems? Stop this day and night with me, and you shall possess the origin of all poems. You shall possess the good of the earth and sun. There are millions of suns left. You shall no longer take things at second or third hand, nor look through the eyes of the dead, nor feed on the specters in books. You shall not look through my eyes either. nor take things from me. You shall listen to all sides and filter them from yourself.
Mending Wall by Robert Frost. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen groundswell under it and spills the upper boulders in the sun and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. The work of hunters is another thing. I have come after them and made repair, where they have left not one stone on a stone, but they would have the rabbit out of hiding to please the yelping dogs. The gaps, I mean. No one has seen them made or heard them made, but it's spring mending time. We find them there. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go, to each the boulders that have fallen to each. And some are loaves, and some so nearly balls, we have to use a spell to make them bounce. Stay where you are until our backs are turned. We wear our fingers rough from handling them. Oh, just another kind of outdoor game, one on a side. It comes to little more. There, where it is, we do not need the wall. He is all pine, and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under his pines. I tell him. He only says, good fences make good neighbors. Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down, I could say, elves to him. But it's not elves exactly, and I'd rather he said it for himself. I see him there, bringing a stone grasped firmly by the top in each hand, like an old stone savage armed. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me, not of woods only, and the shade of trees. He will not go behind his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well. He says it again, good fences make good neighbors.
I Sing of Olaf, Glad and Big, by E. Cummings. I sing of Olaf, glad and big, whose warmest heart recoiled at war, a conscientious objector. His well-beloved colonel, Trig West Pointer, most succinctly bred, took erring Olaf soon in hand, but, though an host of overjoyed non-coms, first knocking on the head him, do through icy waters roll that helplessness which others stroke with brushes recently employed anent this muddy toilet bowl, while kindred intellects evoke allegiance per blunt instruments. Olaf, being to all intents a corpse, and wanting any rag upon what God unto him gave, responds, without getting annoyed, I will not kiss your fucking flag. Straightway the silver bird looked grave, departing hurriedly to shave. But though all kinds of officers, a yearning nation's blue-eyed pride, their passive prey did kick and curse, until for where their clarion voices and boots were much the worse, and egged the first-class privates on his rectum wickedly to tease, by means of skillfully applied bayonets, roasted hot with heat. Olaf, upon what were once knees, does almost ceaselessly repeat, there is some shit I will not eat. Our president, being of which assertions duly notified, threw the yellow son of a bitch into a dungeon where he died. Christ of his mercy infinite, I pray to see, and Olaf too, preponderatingly because, unless statistics lie, he was more brave than me, more blonde than you.
What Lips My Lips Have Kissed by Edna St. Vincent Millay. What lips my lips have kissed, and where and why I have forgotten, and what arms have lain under my head till morning. But the rain is full of ghosts tonight that tap and sigh upon the glass and listen for reply. And in my heart there stirs a quiet pain for unremembered lads that not again will turn to me at midnight with a cry. Thus in the winter stands the lonely tree, nor knows what birds have vanished one by one, yet knows its boughs more silent than before. I cannot say what loves have come and gone. I only know that summer sang in me a little while, that in me sings no more.
Kind of an Ode to Duty by Ogden Nash. O duty, why hast thou not the visage of a sweetie or a cutie? Why displayest thou the countenance of the kind of conscientious organizing spinster, that the minute you see her, you are against her? Why glitter thy spectacles so ominously? Why art thou clad so abominously? Why art thou so different from Venus? And why do thou and I have so few interests mutually in common between us? Why art thou 50% martyr and 51% Tartar? Why is thou unfortunate wont to try to attract people by calling on them either to leave undone the deeds they like or to do the deeds they don't? Why art thou so like an April postmortem on something that died in the autumn? Above all, why dost thou continue to hound me? Why art thou always albatrossly hanging around me? Thou art so ubiquitous, and I so iniquitous. I seem to be the one person in the world thou art, perpetually preaching at who or to who. Whatever looks like fun, thereout thou standing, between me and it, calling you who? O duty, duty, how noble a man should I be haddest thou the visage of a sweetie or a cutie? Wert thou but houri instead of hag, then would my halo indeed be in the bag. But as it is, thou art so much forbiddenger than a Woodhouse hero's forbiddenness on't, that in the words of the poet, when duty whispers low, thou must, this erstwhile youth replies, I just can't.
This is an excerpt from Howl by Allen Ginsberg. I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, dragging themselves through the Negro streets at dawn looking for an angry fix. Angel-headed hipsters burning for the ancient heavenly connection to the starry dynamo in the machinery of night. who, poverty and tatters and hollow-eyed and high, sat up smoking in the supernatural darkness of cold water flats floating across the tops of cities, contemplating jazz, who bared their brains to heaven under the L and saw Mohammedan angels staggering on tenement roofs illuminated, who passed through universities with radiant, cool eyes, hallucinating Arkansas and Blake light tragedy among the scholars of war, who were expelled from the academies for crazy and publishing obscene odes to the windows of the skull, on the windows of the skull, who cowered in unshaven rooms in underwear, burning their money in wastebaskets and listening to the terror through the wall, who got busted in their public beards returning through Laredo with a belt of marijuana for New York, who ate fire in paint hotels or drank turpentine in Paradise Alley, death or purgatorial their torsos night after night, with dreams, with drugs, with waking nightmares, alcohol and cock and endless balls, incomparable blind streets of shuddering cloud and lightning in the mind leaping forward, poles of Canada and Patterson, illuminating all the motionless world of time between.
Peyote solidities of halls, backyard green tree cemetery dawns, wine drunkenness over the rooftops, storefront burrows of T-head joyride, neon blinking traffic light, sun and moon and tree vibrations in the roaring winter dusks of Brooklyn, ash can rantings and kind king light of mine, who chain themselves to subways for the endless ride from Battery to Holy Bronx on Benzedrine until the noise of wheels and children brought them down, shuddering, mouth-racked and battered, bleak of brain, all drained of brilliance in the drear light of Zoo, who sank all night in submarine light of Bickford's, floated out and sat through stale beer afternoon in desolate Fugazi's, listening to the crack of doom on the hydrogen jukebox, who talked continuously 70 hours from park to pad to bar to Bellevue to museum to the Brooklyn Bridge. A lost battalion of platonic conversationalists jumping down the stoops off fire escapes, off windowsills, off Empire State, out of the moon, yakety-yakking, screaming, vomiting, whispering facts and memories and anecdotes and eyeball kicks and shocks of hospitals and jails and wars. Whole intellects disgorged in total recall for 7 days and nights with brilliant eyes, meet for the synagogue cast on the pavement, who vanished into nowhere, Zen, New Jersey, leaving a trail of ambiguous picture postcards of Atlantic City Hall, suffering eastern sweats and tangerine bone grindings and migraines of China under junk withdrawal in Newark's bleak furnished room, who wandered around and around at midnight in the railroad yard, wondering where to go, and went, leaving no broken hearts, who lit cigarettes in boxcars, racketing through snow toward lonesome farms in grandfather night.
Don't Let That Horse by Lawrence Ferlinghetti. Don't let that horse eat that violin, cried Chagall's mother. But he kept right on painting and became famous and kept on painting the horse with violin in mouth. And when he finally finished it, he jumped up upon the horse and rode away, waving the violin. And then, with a low bow, gave it to the first naked nude he ran across, and there were no strings attached.
London by Lawrence Ferlinghetti. London, cross-figured, creeping with trams, and the artists on Sundays in the summer, all tracking nature in the suburbs. It could have been any place, but it wasn't. It was London. And when someone shouted over that they had got a model, I ran out across the court. But then, when the model started taking off her clothes, there was nothing underneath. I mean to say, she took off her clothes and found no feet, took off her top and found no tit under it. And I must say she did look a bit astounded, just standing there, looking down at where her legs were not. But so very carefully then, she put her clothes back on. And as soon as she was dressed again, completely, she was completely all right. "Do it again," cried someone, rushing for his easel, but she was afraid to, and gave up modeling, and forever after slept in her clothes.
I'll read two poems by Marie Ponceau. The first was written after the birth of her fifth child. Multipora, gravida 5. Come to term, the started child shocks peace upon me. I am great with peace. Pain teaches primal cause. My bones unlock to learn my final end. The formal increase of passionate patience breaks into a storm of heat where, calling on you, love, my heart's hopes rise with violence to seize as prayer this sweet submitting act. I pray, loud with surprise, thrown, sprung back wide, the blithe body lies, exultant and wise. The born child cries. This poem is Among Women by Marie Ponceau. What women wander? Not many, all, a few. Most would now and then, and no wonder. Some, and I'm one, wander sitting still. My small grandmother bought from every peddler less for the ribbons and lace than for their scent of sleep where you will, walk out when you want, choose your bread and your company. She warned me, have nothing to lose. She looked fragile, but had high blood, runner's ankles, could endure. She loved her rooted garden, her grandchildren, her once wild, once young man. Women wander as best they can.
To Eros by Denise Levertov. Eros, O Eros, hail thy palate, God who knows good pasta, good bread, good brie. The beauty of freckled squid, flowers of the sea fresh off the boat, graces thy altar, Eros, which is in our eyes, and on our lips the blood of berries before we kiss, before we stumble to bed. Our bed must be in thy service earth, as the strawberry bed is earth, a ground for miracles. The flesh is delicate, we must nourish it. Desire hungers for wine, for clear, plain water, good, strong coffee, as well as for hard cock and throbbing clitoris, and the glide and thrust of sentence and paragraph in and up to the last sweet sigh of a chapter's ending.
I Explain a Few Things by Pablo Neruda. You will ask, but where are the lilacs and the metaphysics covered with poppies and the rain that often struck his words, filling them with holes and birds? Let me tell you what's happening with me. I lived in a barrio of Madrid with bells, with clocks, with trees. From there you could see the parched face of Castile like an ocean of leather. My house was called the House of Flowers because from everywhere geraniums burst. It was a beautiful house with dogs and children. Raul, do you remember? Do you remember Raphael? Federico, do you remember? Under the ground, do you remember my house with balconies where the June light drowned the flowers in your mouth? Brother, everything was loud voices, salt of goods, crowds of pulsating bread, marketplaces in my barrio of Arguelles with its statue like a pale inkwell set down among the hake. Oil flowed into spoons. A deep throbbing of feet and hands filled the streets. Meters, liters, the hard edges of life, heaps of fish, geometry of roofs under a cold sun in which the weather vane grew tired, delirious fine ivory of potatoes, tomatoes, more tomatoes, all the way to the sea.
And one morning it all was burning, and one morning bonfires sprang from the earth, devouring humans, and from then on fire. Gunpowder from then on, and from then on blood. Bandidos with plains and moors, bandidos with rings and duchesses, bandidos with black friars signing the cross, coming down from the sky to kill children. And in the streets, the blood of the children ran simply, like blood of children. Jackals, the jackals would despise. Stones, the dry thistle would bite on and spit out. Vipers, the vipers would abominate. Facing you, I have seen the blood of Spain rise up to drown you in a single wave of pride and knives. Traitors, generals, look at my dead house. Look at Spain broken. From every house, burning metal comes out instead of flowers. From every crater of Spain comes Spain. From every dead child comes a rifle with eyes, and from every crime, bullets are born, that one day will find out in you the sight of the heart. You will ask, why doesn't his poetry speak to us of dreams, of leaves, of the great volcanoes in his native land? Come and see the blood in the streets. Come and see the blood in the streets. Come and see the blood in the streets.
The next two poems are by Gwendolyn Brooks. We Real Cool. The pool players, 7 at the Golden Shovel. We real cool. We left school. We lurk late. We strike straight. We sing sin. We thin gin. We jazz June. We die soon. Riot. A riot is the language of the unheard, Martin Luther King. John Cabot out of Wilma, once a Wycliffe, all white blue rose below his golden hair, wrapped richly in right linen and right wool, almost forgot his jaguar and Lake Bluff, almost forgot Grand Tule, which is the best thing that ever happened to Scotch, almost forgot the sculpture at the Richard Gray and Distelheim, the kidney pie at Maxime's, the grenadine de boeuf at Maison Henri, because the Negroes were coming down the street, because the poor were sweaty and unpretty, not like two dainty Negroes in Winnetka, and they were coming toward him in rough ranks, in C's, in windsweep. They were black and loud and not detainable and not discreet. Gross, gross, que tu o grossier. John Cabot itched instantly beneath his nourished white that told his story of glory to the world. Don't let it touch me. The blackness, Lord, he whispered to any handy angel in the sky. But in a thrilling announcement, on it drove and breathed on him and touched him. In that breath, the fume of pigfoot, chitterling and cheap chili. Malign mocked John, and in terrific touch, old averted doubt jerked forward decently, cried, Cabot, John, you are a desperate man, and the desperate die expensively today. John Cabot went down in the smoke and fire and broken glass and blood, and he cried, Lord, forgive these niggas, they know not what they do.
Consorting with Angels by Anne Sexton. I was tired of being a woman, tired of the spoons and the pots, tired of my mouth and my breasts, tired of the cosmetics and the silks. There were still men who sat at my table, circled around the bowl I offered up. The bowl was filled with purple grapes, and the flies hovered in for the scent. And even my father came with his white bone, but I was tired of the gender of things. Last night I had a dream, and I said to it, you are the answer. You will outlive my husband and my father. In that dream there was a city made of chains, where Joan was put to death in man's clothes, and the nature of the angels went unexplained. No two made in the same species, one with a nose, one with an ear in its hand, one chewing a star and recording its orbit, each one like a poem obeying itself, performing God's functions a people apart. You are the answer, I said, and entered, lying down on the gates of the city. Then the chains were fastened around me, and I lost my common gender and my final aspect. Adam was on the left of me, and Eve was on the right of me, both thoroughly inconsistent with the world of reason. We wove our arms together and rode under the sun. I was not a woman anymore, not one thing or the other. O daughters of Jerusalem, the king has brought me into his chamber. I am black and I am beautiful. I have been opened and undressed. I've no arms or legs. I'm all one skin like a fish. I'm no more a woman than Christ was a man.
The Hiding Place by Jory Graham. The last time I saw it was 1968, Paris, France, the time of the disturbances. We had claims, schools shut down, 1 million workers and students on strike, marches, sit-ins, helicopters, gas. They stopped you at gunpoint asking for papers. I spent 11 nights sleeping in the halls, arguments, negotiations. Hurrying in the dawn looking for a certain leader, I found his face above an open street fire. No, he said, tell them no concessions. His voice above the fire as if there were no fire. Language floating everywhere above the sleeping bodies, and crates of fruit donated in secret, and torn sheets for tear gas tossed down from shuttered windows, and bread and blankets stolen from the firehouse. The CRS, the government police, would swarm in around dawn in small blue vans and round us up. Once I watched the search beams play on some flames. The flames push up into the corridor of light. In the cell, we were so crowded that no one could sit or lean. People peed on each other. I felt a girl vomiting gently onto my back. I found 2 Americans rounded up by chance. Their charter left that morning, they screamed. What were they going to do? Later, a man in a uniform came in with a stick, started beating here and there, found the girl in her 8th month. He beat her frantically over and over. He pummeled her belly, screaming, "Aren't you ashamed?"
I remember the cell vividly, but is it from a photograph? I think the shadows, as I see them still, the slatted, brilliant bits against the wall, I think they're true, but are they from a photograph? Do I see it from inside now, his hands, her face, or is it from the news account? The strangest part of getting out again was streets, the light running down them, everything spilling whenever the wall breaks, and the air thick with dwellings, the air filled, doubled, as if the open had been made to render. The open squeezed for space until the hollows spill out, story upon story of them, starting to light up as I walked out. How thick was the empty meant to be? What were we finding in the air? What were we meant to find? I went home slowly, sat in my rented room, sat for a long time, the window open, watched the white gauze curtains slough this way, then that a bit, watched the air suck it out, push it back in, lung of the room with street cries in it. Watched until the lights outside made it gold, pumping gently. Was I meant to get up again? I was inside. The century clicked by. The woman below called down not to forget the loaf. Crackle of helicopters, voice on a loudspeaker issuing warnings. They made agreements, we all returned to work. The government fell, but then it was all right again. The man above the fire, listening to my question. The red wool shirt he wore, where is it? Who has it? He looked straight back into the century. No concessions. I took the message back. The look in his eyes shoving out into the open, expressionless with thought. No. Tell them no.
Visits to St. Elizabeth's by Elizabeth Bishop. This is the house of Bedlam. This is the man that lies in the house of Bedlam. This is the time of the tragic man that lies in the house of Bedlam. This is a wristwatch telling the time of the talkative man that lies in the house of Bedlam.
This is a sailor wearing the watch that tells the time of the honor man that lies in the house of Bedlam. This is the roadster all of board, reached by the sailor wearing the watch that tells the time of the old brave man that lies in the house of Bedlam. These are the years and the walls of the ward, the winds and cloud, the sea of board, sailed by the sailor wearing the watch that tells the time of the cranky man that lies in the house of Bedlam.
This is a Jew in a newspaper hat that dances weeping down the ward over the creaking sea of board, beyond the sailor winding his watch that tells the time of the cruel man that lies in the house of Bedlam. This is a world of books gone flat. This is a Jew in a newspaper hat that dances weeping down the ward over the creaking sea of board of the batty sailor that winds his watch, that tells the time of the busy man that lies in the house of Bedlam.
This is a boy that pats the floor to see if the world is there, is flat. For the whittled Jew in a newspaper hat that dances weeping down the ward, waltzing the length of a weaving board, by the silent sailor that hears his watch, that takes the time of the tedious man that lies in the house of Bedlam. These are the years and the walls and the door that shut on a boy that pats the floor to feel if the world is there and flat. This is a Jew in a newspaper hat that dances joyfully down the ward into the parting seas of board, past the staring sailor that shakes his watch, that tells the time of the poet, the man that lies in the house of Bedlam.
This is the soldier home from the war. These are the years and the walls and the door that shut on a boy that pats the floor to see if the world is round or flat. This is a Jew in a newspaper hat that dances carefully down the ward, walking the plank of a coffin board, with the crazy sailor that shows his watch, that tells the time of the wretched man that lies in the house of Bedlam.
And now for something completely different. Yertle the Turtle by Dr. Seuss. On the faraway island of Salamasand, Yertle the Turtle was king of the pond. A nice little pond. It was clean, it was neat. The water was warm, there was plenty to eat. The turtles had everything turtles might need. And they were all happy, quite happy indeed. They were, until Yertle, the king of them all, decided the kingdom he ruled was too small. I'm ruler, said Yertle, of all that I see. But I don't see enough. That's the trouble with me. With this stone for a throne, I look down on my pond, but I cannot look down on places beyond. This throne that I sit on is too low down. It ought to be higher, he said with a frown. If I could sit high, how much greater I'd be. What a king, I'd be ruler of all that I see. So Yertle, the Turtle King, lifted his hand, and Yertle, the Turtle King, gave a command. He ordered 9 turtles to swim to his stone, and using these turtles, he built a new home, a new throne. He made each turtle stand on one another's back. He piled them all up in a 9-turtle stack. And then Yertle climbed up. He sat down on the pile. What a wonderful view. He could see most a mile. All mine, Yertle cried. Oh, the things I now rule. I'm king of a cow, and I'm king of a mule. I'm king of a house, and what's more beyond that, I'm king of a blueberry bush and a cat. I'm Yertle the Turtle, oh marvelous me, for I am ruler of all that I see. And all through the morning he sat there up high, saying over and over, a great king am I, until long about noon. Then he heard a faint sigh. What's that? Snapped the king, and he looked down the stack. And he saw at the bottom a turtle named Mac, just part of his throne. And this plain little turtle looked up and he said, beg your pardon, King Yertle. I've pains in my back and my shoulders and knees. How long must we stand here, your majesty, please? Silence, the king of the turtles barked back. I'm king, and you're only a turtle named Mac. You stay in your place while I sit here and rule. I'm king of a cow, and I'm king of a mule. I'm king of a house, a bush, and a cat. But that isn't all. I'll do better than that. My throne shall be higher, his royal voice thundered. So pile up more turtles. I want about 200.
Turtles, more turtles, he bellowed and brayed, and the turtles way down in the pond were afraid. They trembled, they shook, but they came. They obeyed. From all over the pond they came, swimming by dozens, whole families of turtles with uncles and cousins. All of them stepped on the head of poor Mac. One after another they climbed up the stack. Then Yertle the Turtle was perched up so high he could see 40 miles from his throne in the sky. Hooray, shouted Yertle. I'm king of the trees, I'm king of the birds, and I'm king of the bees. I'm king of the butterflies, king of the air. Ah, me, what a throne. What a wonderful chair. I'm Yertle the Turtle, oh marvelous me, for I am ruler of all that I see. Then again, from below in the great heavy stack came a groan from that plain little turtle named Mac. Your Majesty, please, I don't like to complain, but down here below we are feeling great pain. I know up on top you are seeing great sights, but down at the bottom we too should have rights. We turtles can't stand it. Our shells will all crack. Besides, we need food. We're starving, groaned Mac. You hush up your mouth, howled the mighty King Yertle. You've no right to talk to the world's highest turtle. I rule from the clouds. Over land, over sea, there's nothing, no, nothing that's higher than me. But while he was shouting, he saw with surprise that the moon of the evening was starting to rise up over his head in the darkening skies. What's that? Snorted Yertle. Say, what is that thing that dares to be higher than Yertle, the king? I shall not allow it. I'll go higher still. I'll build my throne higher. I can and I will. I'll call some more turtles. I'll stack them to heaven. I need about 5,607. But as Yertle, the Turtle King, lifted his hand and started to order and give the command, that plain little turtle below in the stack, that plain little turtle whose name was just Mac, decided he'd taken enough. And he had. And that plain little lad got a little bit mad, and that plain little Mac did a plain little thing. He burped. And his burp shook the throne of the king. And Yertle of the turtle, the king of the trees, the king of the air and the bird and the bees, the king of a house and a cow and a mule, well, that was the end of the Turtle King's rule. For Yertle, the king of all Salomon Pond, fell off his high throne and fell plunk in the pond. And today the great Yertle, that marvelous sea, is king of the mud. That's all he can see, and the turtles, of course, all the turtles are free, as turtles and maybe all creatures should be.
Manifesto by Ellen Hopkins. To you zealots and bigots and false patriots who live in fear of discourse, you screamers and banners and burners who would force books off shelves in your brand name of greater good, you say you're afraid for children, innocence ripe for corruption, by perversion or sorcery on the page. But sticks and stones do break bones, and ignorance is no armor. You do not speak for me, and will not deny my kids' magic in favor of miracles. You say you're afraid for America, the red, white, and blue corroded by terrorists, socialists, the sexually confused. But we are a vast quilt of patchwork cultures and multi-gendered identities. You cannot speak for those whose ancestors braved different seas. You say you're afraid for God, the living word eroded by Muhammad and Darwin and Magdalene, but the omnipotent sculptor of heaven and earth designed intelligence. Surely you dare not speak for the Father, who opens his arms to all. A word to the unwise, torch every book, char every page, burn every word to ash. Ideas are incombustible, and there lies your real fear. And do we have anybody who would like to discuss what you heard today? Yes, you come up.
I really enjoyed myself. I came in a little late because of Iowa City Transit decided to skip a run. But I really enjoyed it. The only thing I miss is that nobody applauded. I guess that, I got, the spirit moved me, but I said maybe this is like the opera. You can't applaud.
Do we have any other comments today? So did you figure out where we were in history when those poems were written? Did you? I think Dr. Seuss is no different than Neruda, but I think also that you could take those poems out of context and apply them to today and see what the author is saying, and that's the power of poetry. So I just wanted to thank everybody for coming today. Again, thank the Read Aloud group and the Senior Center for sponsoring.